Hello, everyone. We are live. Actually, the first time we've been live in a couple of weeks, but my name is Stacy Nell, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas African American Affairs Commission. And I am thrilled to be joined today by Miss Kimberlyn Jones of the Kansas Department of, the Office of Broadband Development.
Right.
Did I say that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hi, nice to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about what we're doing over in the state of Kansas.
Fantastic. Now, I did a little, I always do a little Googling of people before they come on. And so I know that you have been in the Office of Broadband Development. It's a part of the Kansas Department of Commerce since October of 2022. Right. And then you have an extensive background in workforce and business development. But I also saw that you used to be the executive artistic director of the Kansas City Metropolitan Dance Theater.
Yes, and I still am.
Oh, see, I love hearing that about people. I think I'm so in the business and government and politics that I'm like, oh, there's this whole artistic side. So just briefly, like, tell us about that. Like, just before we get into, the nitty gritty of why you're here.
Well, I grew up next door to a legendary dance studio, Smith Sisters Dance Studio in Kansas City. And I was living next door to them. And so all the kids in the neighborhood went to the dance studio except for me. And my mother said, you can go if you took piano lessons. I said, fine. So I took piano lessons and I ended up loving the art of dance and stayed in it, had a minor in it in college, came back and taught as a major, one of the key teachers at the studio where I grew up. And when they passed away, I continued their legacy, renamed it the Kansas City Metropolitan Dance Theater, but still honor their legacy and operate, on their mantra, and have learned to continue the art of dance in the community and have learned how important it is for development of our children in the community. They don't do the dance and the too much, the arts and activities and physical activities and things in the schools have kind of diminished a little bit. They do have the after school programs, but it's an old art form that continues to help with development, life skills, commitment, collaboration, working with others, just growing in a certain way. And it's my way to give back to the community. So this is 17 years under my direction that have weathered the storm. We didn't even close through COVID. So we have weathered the storm. We serve about anywhere from 70 to 90 children every year. And we're located on 55th and Troost, and that's it. That's what I do to keep my sanity.
Yeah, I hear you.
Or it does something else to me when you're dealing with that many kids.
Yeah, it might make you crazy. I'm glad that I ran across that little detail about you because we're going to launch into a nice technical conversation about broadband access in Kansas, in light of the pandemic. But it is nice to highlight the fact and just to remind us that the arts do play such a big part of just a well-rounded life, right? And dancing and music and singing and painting and, photography, sculpture, whatever it is. But
yeah, it is an awesome, it has kept me, I think, young and active. During my career, I got a chance to dance with Alvin Ailey, the Kansas City Ballet, Philadelphia and Philadelphia, the Chicago, did some collaboration with the, the Chicago Metropolitan, it's a long name, Metropolitan Dance Company. So Joel Hall in Chicago. I've just kind of traveled around the country doing some dance in New York at Steps and Gus Giordano. I know these are probably names that don't mean much to you, but some of the greats I've got a chance to touch or do a conference or do some kind of dance thing. It's just been a passion of mine, but it doesn't pay the bills.
Isn't it sad? There's so many things that are so worthwhile in this world and they don't pay the bills, right?
And then the older you get, it feels different. So, but I've got a chance to have some great experiences through dance, and I just give it back to the community.
That's awesome. Okay, but that's not, that's just little bonus content there. They call it. So, but I did bring you on because of your role with the Kansas Department of Commerce in the broadband access, or I keep one. I have to look it up. Office of Broadband Development.
Right.
So
Under the Department of Commerce.
Right. So tell us what that is, because it is a fairly new department, and then we can get into, what's going on with your department.
Right. So the Kansas Office of Broadband Development, it is an office that was established in 2020. And basically it was to ensure, under the Biden administration, the internet for all, it was to ensure that all Kansas have affordable and quality and reliable internet access. The COVID brought this to our attention. This is work that has been done for a long time. However, when children were falling behind, they didn't have the environment to learn at home during COVID. They didn't have internet, the environment, they didn't have the devices, and then they didn't have someone at home that could help them navigate through the internet and get their homework done. So our office, and then we're finding that there are vulnerable populations that we're falling behind, getting left behind, not being able to participate or operate on a day-to-day, strive and thrive day-to-day operations as this world continues to go more digital. And again, COVID brought that to our attention. We had to do more things online, more things online via the internet. We had to depend on it solely, and it's continued to move forward. You can't apply for a job or set up a doctor's appointment. If you have to get food and you can't get out, you have to do everything really online.
Right. Yeah. The world has definitely moved online, a lot of more areas. So did the department come to exist in 2022, or was it? Okay. That's when it became.
Yeah, it was established in 2020.
Oh, in 2020, but you've been there
I
since
started in October 2022. It was established in 2020. We had one, I think it's only had one other director. And actually he works for one of the service providers that we're working with now. And then Jade Pyros de Carvalho is our current director. And she was appointed the position last June. So it's really, really new. And then she has started to build her team. And when I started in October, there were only 2 of us. And now there are 7. And we have 3 positions open right now to grow the team to 10.
Gotcha. So what is the work of your office? Because I know that's I love talking about dance and the arts, but what is the work of your office, and what do you need? I know you're trying to get out into Kansas and contact people. And so what is the work of your Office of Broadband Development, and then specifically with the digital equity programs?
Right. So the broadband office operates on 2 pillars. There's 2 components to our office. One is the infrastructure, and you'll hear several times in the broadband world, BEAD, and that's broadband equity access deployment. And what they're doing right now, there were grants out there right now that we're working with service providers to lay fiber throughout the state of Kansas to make sure that people can get access to the internet. Okay, make sure that it's out there and it's available to them. So that's what's currently going on right now, because if you don't have the infrastructure, having a device or being able to afford it is a moot point, right? So right now, our office is working with service providers, telecompanies, cable companies, anyone in the communications area who can help and assist with first fiber, getting fiber laid down so people can get internet, and or fixed wireless, which some of the phone companies are doing, these cell phone companies, because as anyone may imagine, that the state of Kansas is a unique state with respect to landscape, topography, geography, land, the way it's laid out. It's a Great Plains state. And so fiber may not work through a lot of rock, So those are some of the challenges that we're facing right now, is how do we get it to everyone? And it's a rural state. So with it being rural, when you talk about a return on your investment, you lay thousands and millions of dollars of fiber down to reach 2 families, how do you justify that?
Right.
Because it is no one's fault,
So are those some of the unique problems of getting internet access into the rural communities? Because I know there's lots of discussion about access in the urban communities, but then access in the rural communities. I guess I'd never really thought about that. How much fiber or how much wiring or how much infrastructure has to be built just to reach. I know there are counties that have maybe 5 people per square mile.
Exactly. And so, yes, that is quite an issue, but, we all need it. I mean, at one time, as I drive throughout the state, I look at all the telephone poles and all the wiring that's draped around. I'm like, at one time, everyone didn't have a telephone.
True.
And now, now we need to operate digitally. And yes, that is quite a barrier when you might have 3 or 4 people to reach, and you're laying millions of dollars of fiber down and investment and, workers and connecting, and you got middle mile and last mile, those kind of things to connect, make all the things connect so people can operate day to day. And so, we want to grow the state and grow communities and grow business parks. So it's one of those things, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Businesses and people don't want to be in certain places in Kansas because there isn't any internet access, or it's not reliable, or it's too costly. But then from the business standpoint, it's like, well, we're not going to make that investment because no one's there. So it's like, who goes first? Do you make the investment first and draw people there, or do people wait and stay there until they get it? So yeah, those are unique challenges of the state. And then the other pillar is my part, is the digital equity part, that once the infrastructure is in place, my focus is internet equity with respect to having access to it and being able to afford it. So right now there's the ACP, or the Affordable Connectivity Program, administered by the government, that gives a $30 subsidy for people to be able to afford the internet. And then there are devices there. You may have the internet, but do you have a device? Do you have a reliable laptop and the equipment and the desktop or any kind of computer at home to use it other than your cell phone? Because the cell phone is small, and yes, it can do a million things. But as we all know, there's only so much you can do on a 3x5 card, when you can do much more and expand more and have more capability on a larger size equipment. So, and then the third element is digital skills. Can you use the equipment, and how can you navigate the internet? And there are certain populations that are vulnerable to not having the skills, not having the devices, and not being able to afford the internet. And that's the component that I work with. So our office works congruent with each other. We work together with respect to making sure all Kansas have internet access, but that they're able to use it as well.
Right. So how is it going on? We'll start with the infrastructure side. How is it going with just getting people literally connected, like physically connected in both urban areas and rural areas?
Right. It's the entire state.
Yeah.
So and just because it's rural doesn't mean that people, in the inner city has it, because there are pockets of people that don't have it for various reasons. But it's going well. I mean, we have public comment, we have people that have the opportunity to share their experiences with service providers. The government has some regulations and stipulations on what we'd like to have with respect to speed, location, reliability, those kind of things. So,
and when you say the government, is that state or federal?
It's the federal government.
Federal.
And we have the NTIA, which is the National Telecommunications Information Administration, who is administering a lot of these grants that we're working with. And I'm not on that side. I don't want to say fortunate or unfortunate, but we have a team that is working on the infrastructure side to make sure that, these companies are providing what they say they're going to provide with respect to speed and reliability and and where they're providing the service. That, you know, if you say you're providing service in this particular area, that it's the entire area is covered,
Right.
and not just certain portions. And affordability, you know, you may be servicing people, but can they afford it? You know, we want to make sure that there's some fair charges out there for people to be able to afford it. And that's what this ACP program is doing right now, to help people to afford it.
Okay. So that's on the infrastructure side. So then on the equity side, so tell us about the work that your office specifically does in terms of digital equity.
Well, what we've done is, one, we want to get the word out that we are working and striving from the state of Kansas to make sure everyone gets, actually just have full participation in this economy and democracy. We want to make sure everyone has full participation in the way we operate in this society today. So what we did is we broke down the state in the 8 economic development districts that the state is broken up into. And we strategically scheduled broadband, what we called our roadshow, strategically scheduled a roadshow so that we can cover all 105 counties of the state of Kansas and let them know we're here, we're helping you, we're working with the service providers. We want to know who's in your community and what are you doing to help people get the internet access. What barriers are you facing? What assets do you have? What are your needs? Who's in your community that can help with, you know, what service providers are really trying to work with the community? How large is your community that doesn't have it? You know, how do we reach these people? What nonprofit organizations are out there trying to assist people? We have our librarians, we have our commissioners, we have workforce agencies that are out there. We want to know what's going on and who's who and what's what and who's connected. And so we've made 27 stops throughout the state of Kansas, having focus groups and listening sessions. We have a particular set of questions that we ask the same of every community so we can compare the responses. We are responsible for a 5-year plan, digital equity plan, that we have to submit to the government. We gather this information by doing this tour and doing those 27 stops and visiting those 27 communities and seeing what they have to say. And
is the roadshow still happening, or you're done with the physically? I know there's an online survey, and I'll drop that in the chat. But are you still going out physically into the community?
We're pretty much done. We stopped in Dodge City last week at a very heavily Hispanic populated community and spoke with them. And we had to bring an interpreter and someone to speak Spanish because some of them didn't even speak English. And so that's, you know, those are part of our efforts too, is reaching refugees, Hispanic, non-speaking community people. I mean, those are the people that are most vulnerable. And we need to know where they are and what they need and how we can help. So yes, we have wind down the roadshow, but since we're out there in the community and we have been exposed, people are asking us to come and visit and come and speak in particular events, i.e. there is an AARP event going on in Wichita in June that I will be attending. And that is to help, of course, the aging with respect to how do you do internet. Their biggest thing is telehealth. You know, how do we do telehealth appointments over the phone or over the internet? They may be too sick or disabled, not mobile, to get to their doctor's appointment. And there's an easier way of doing that digitally now. So when people are asking us to come out and make presentations, we're still doing it, but our intentional efforts have wound down. We've gathered a lot of information, and now we have to put them into a plan to submit to the government in the 3rd quarter of this year.
Now, I know there is still a survey online if people still want to participate.
Absolutely.
I put the link to that in the chat as well. So if you do want to, and I've said this so much in the last few months. I was like, it's funny. We need a new word in English for it's funny, because it's not funny, haha. It's interesting. It's
right.
thought provoking. It's something that maybe I don't often consider when I think of internet access, or people who might have barriers to internet access. Because of the work that I do, oftentimes first thing I think about is if people can't afford to get a computer, or if they're living in an area where the lines aren't laid. But then it's almost this running joke, right? That older people may not know how to use the, so maybe they can afford it. They live in an area where they have it, but having the knowledge to actually use it, or
Right.
the comfortability with the technology, I think is something that doesn't always cross my mind.
Right. The aging kind of resisted. I did it. I'd live without it all this time. Why do I need it now?
Yeah.
And during our roadshow, we're finding that people get ill, get sick. We went to a native reservation and someone passed away for a couple of days. They couldn't find a person because they didn't have the signals in the internet access to call someone to tell them they were in danger. And so they found a person of their tribe that was had deceased a couple of days before someone could find them. Wow. So, it's the way we operate today. I have an 89-year-old mom. She's a retired school teacher. And so she's staying up to date and realizing the importance of having internet access. But every now and then, she misses her password, and it just destroys her world. But, I mean, these are the patience and the small things that we need to do to help our aging. And it's not just the aging, our covered populations we're targeting, or we know that are most vulnerable, are the disabled. Of course, they're not as mobile, and they could have some other disabilities that keep them from being able to access the internet or be able to operate through digitally. But there are ways to do that. And we have met with the Assisted Technology Council with the state of Kansas. They're the veterans, the disabled, the aging. We have refugees. It's a great population of refugees in the state of Kansas. Your minority and ethnic groups, those who have been incarcerated. iPhone changes every 6 months to a year. And if you've spent some time incarcerated, can you imagine the leaps and bounds that you have to do to catch up with where we are today? So these are some of the covered populations, low income. You don't have the internet. And this is how I got passionate about it, is during COVID, my kids weren't coming to class because they had to do their homework. Why? Because they had to wait for a family to finish their homework and go down the street to borrow their internet and borrow their equipment to be able to do their homework.
Because they didn't have access in their own home.
They didn't have access in their own home. And then I tried to do virtual classes, and they didn't have internet, or they only had the phone, and they couldn't properly, interact in class because they didn't have the equipment. Or the internet was so bad, we couldn't get the connection for them to learn. And so I was like, wow. And it was something I took for granted. And so I've become passionate about it because I experienced this myself with my children. And they turned into bullies, and, they were getting attitudes because they were falling behind in class. And so I brought my desktop and my 2 laptops from home just so they could have the, access to do whatever they wanted. Well, not whatever they wanted, but, do what they needed to do on the internet if they had to do some kind of homework or connect with a teacher. So
you brought that to your dance classes?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, one, that's great that you have the ability to do that, but then not everyone, like you said, you take for granted. I take for granted how many computers we have at our house. It's like, that's not where everyone is at. Okay, so we covered the road show and then the survey. So I put the survey in. So you're still seeking input, and that survey, I dropped the link that is in English, but that survey is also available in Spanish and Vietnamese. So if you know people who are not comfortable with English as a first language, there are other language options out there.
And this survey is helping us gather information to put into our plan.
Right.
And then the state would receive a minimum of $1 million to implement this plan. But I want people to know that the plan involves everyone in the state. We want everyone's input so we can put it in the plan so that it is the Kansas state plan, and the Kansas state plan would be derived of everyone's experiences, everyone's existing efforts, and everyone's story. So that's why it's so important that we're trying to get the survey out for people.
Right. Fantastic. Okay, so now then let's talk about some of the grant programs. Are there grant programs you wanted to talk about with that, or is that all encompassed?
Right now, the ones that we're working with now, we got a grant to put the plan in place.
Right.
There is another grant coming out called the implementation plan, and that's or the capacity plan. Once we get our plan done, then the government will say, okay, here's money to implement your plan. And then we will have sub-grants after that. We've also been granted a $15 million digital connectivity grant for Wi-Fi and devices. And we are currently putting a program in place for that so that people can get, again, devices, Wi-Fi, things like that. So there are several different grants.
So that's not quite up and running yet.
No, not quite up and running.
Okay.
We've been awarded it, but we haven't been provided it, and we need to put a plan in order. Some of these plan dollars or these grant dollars won't be distributed until probably this time next year. Spring. We're looking at the spring of 2024 because we're in the planning stages right now.
So this is more of like a watch this space type of situation. Mm-hmm. But so I think the thing that we would ask of the public, if I'm trying to figure this out, would be to fill out the survey so that you guys can have an accurate map of who has access to internet or what the needs are in the state, right? So, yeah. Yes,
in the state. And we're developing our asset mapping. So it helps us with information on who has what and where, and be able to, present this to the government, which helps with the funding that we will get. Mm-hmm. So based on who has it or who doesn't, will determine how much money the state gets so that we can provide that access to everyone.
So I mean, it's important to have an accurate number. So if you're watching this, go fill out the survey, kind of whether you have it or not, right? Because it just helps with an accurate number.
And see, that's just it. The people who don't, those are the people we got to reach. And that's the whole challenge of everything.
Right. If you don't have it, you can't fill out the survey.
Right. You can't have it. So we're asking people who do have it, please help those that, may not. We're looking in churches and libraries. We want to get people out of McDonald's parking lots and the church library steps and the back alleys of those Chamber of Commerce, people who have access. Now, if you're in a household, what we learn, if you're in a household with 3 or 4 kids and everyone's trying to do their work and mom and dad is trying to work from home, the oldest kid leaves the house and goes to McDonald's or a coffee shop or the library, or if the library's closed, they go to the parking lot or sit on the steps just so they can access internet. And we're talking seasons here, Right. In 20-degree weather, you got to go out somewhere and sit in a parking lot just so you can do your homework or do your work. So we're trying to eliminate that. We want, people think that the phone is the all ends, albeit to everything, but it is not. And, just as everyone didn't have a phone or a television, the internet access now is a utility. Yeah. It is just like having heat and lights and, water running. So that's where we are in this world today. And our office is doing everything we can to make sure everyone gets connected.
Well, fantastic. All right. So obviously, if someone's watching this, they probably have internet. But if you know somebody who doesn't have internet, I mean, I think that's sometimes that's part of the problem, right? Is that the people who are already in the know are already in the know. It's hard to people who are not in the know. That's the case for so many things.
And we want to we want to promote the ACP program, they can go online, www.getacp.com. And that is the website for the subsidiary for the $30. If people need assistance with internet, I mean, I spend $140 some odd a month for my internet. And that's sometimes a car payment for some people. So, you know, it's either transportation or internet, you know. So those are some assistant programs out there to help people get it. And then I'm almost always available. All of our team members are available via website. If they're people in need of devices and things like that, we have a resource. We're trying to be that clearinghouse, if you will, for resources for people in the state.
All right, I'm trying to drop the link to the Get ACP in the chat. Gave me an error. Wait, looks like it. Okay, it looks like it went through. Okay, so I've got all those things in the chat. So thank you so much. That half an hour sped by.
Oh wow, we are done, are we?
Yeah. So at the end of every lunch and learn, I want to constantly and continually put in a pitch for voting. Our communities are oftentimes underrepresented in terms of people being registered to vote and people actually voting. And here's something very important: voting every year. There is an election every year. And I'm going to talk about voting every time I come on here. I'm not going to talk about voting just because it's an election season. I'm not going to talk about voting just because any particular person is running. Are you registered to vote? Quite frankly, the easiest way to register to vote is online. So it all ties back in even to access, right, and the internet.
Well, interestingly enough, I changed my residency to Kansas. And so when I went to get my driver's license, she says, "Do you want to register to vote?" And I said, "Well, sure. Why not?" And it was just that easy. Just check the box, and I was a registered voter. So
it's just that easy.
It is. It really is.
And, and that's because I was at a meeting yesterday and we were talking about just that. Oftentimes people move and they forget to re-register with their new address. So if you have moved recently, if your child is getting ready to go to college, make sure you talk to your child about getting registered as people start to move out. So I'm always going to talk about voting because ever since the civil rights era was a thing, Black people need to go vote. So go vote.
Exactly.
All right. So thank you so much for joining me, Ms. Jones, today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And I will actually, you know what? Next Monday is Memorial Day, so the office is closed, but I have a pre-recorded interview that I may push out on next Monday anyway. But thanks, everyone.
All righty. Bye-bye. Thank you.